So if you're dealing with a loss of appetite, I know that the advice that you're seeing out there is just, it's pretty worthless. And, oh, why don't you have smaller meals? Or you could have some liquid meals. Just drink your meals if you don't feel like eating. Or, oh, why don't you make some nice ginger tea? It's going to be so nice and it's not really going to do anything. So a lot of these remedies are not going to help fix the actual underlying cause. So in this video, we want to talk about steps that can fix the actual underlying cause of this loss of appetite. And if you haven't already seen our previous video on 5 hidden causes for loss of appetite, you're really going to want to watch that. Understanding the most common underlying causes is really going to help you understand how to do the work to correct the issue. And before we get into these steps, just remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice. I'm just a schmuck stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when I lost my voice for 8 years and 23 doctors couldn't help me get it back, I had to dig for my own answers. And now I just teach what I learned in these books and in my courses to help people find answers a little bit faster. So when we're going over these informations, like these studies that we talk about, and I'll put links to these studies in the description below this video so you can dig into them a little bit more. But what's interesting is all the information that I needed to get my voice back, I found later in the medical literature. And yet none of those 23 doctors knew any of this stuff. So when you're digging through this information, it can help you just understand the right questions to ask your doctor. So when you're looking for answers to get your appetite back, and just know that you really can get your appetite back, we hear from people every single day who fix situations just like this. And when you can learn how to work with your body instead of just making some nice ginger tea, you can really turn some things around. So in the last video, we talked about the most common underlying causes were faulty digestion, hormonal issues with signals that are supposed to happen in this digestive process, and some detoxification problems, and then invaders like overgrowth in the stomach or the small intestine. So since those are the most common causes, the steps we want to take are steps to correct those problems. So the biggest issue is really to acidify this stomach. This is really the biggest problem and the most common problem. And when we're looking at what's going on in that digestive process, when you can't acidify your food correctly, you can't break it down, it's going to rot and ferment, and then it's going to create all those toxins, it's going to stay in the stomach longer like we talked about. These are a lot of the things that are going to create a lot of discomfort. It's going to tell the body to say, hey, don't give me more stuff, I'm still dealing with all this mess. So if we can acidify this correctly, now we can really break that food down and we can actually get the nutrients out of that food. Wouldn't that really be something? So we're going to look at this study on mealtime supplementation with betaine HCl for functional hypochlorhydria. And hypochlorhydria is a condition that means a person is not making enough stomach acid. This is really common. So in this study, they actually gave people a PPI medication, like an acid reflux medication that turns off stomach acid. So then they let that stomach acid be turned off. They watch the symptoms that show up. And a lot of those symptoms are things that go along with dyspepsia or indigestion. And that was one of those underlying causes that we talked about, that people see a lot of correlation between loss of appetite and dyspepsia and indigestion type symptoms. So this study found that when people started having those symptoms, that if they supplemented with a capsule form called betaine HCl, which is really just a supplemental form of the hydrochloric acid that your stomach is supposed to make when you eat food. So if they supplemented with that supplemental form of betaine HCl capsules during their meal, that they could improve those symptoms that were dyspepsia type symptoms. So you can dig into that study and you'll see that, holy mackerel, they had people, they turned off their stomach acid, they had these symptoms, and then they reacidified it and it fixed those symptoms. So this is something that we've been doing with our clients for 20 years, and the study even talked about how thousands of practitioners around the world do this with their patients. So the tricky part is that a lot of people will start supplementing with HCl and they'll really get magnified discomfort. Because if you have some type of overgrowth in your stomach or even your small intestine that's putting out all this alkaline waste and byproducts, when you put acid in there, now the acid is going to mix with this alkaline waste and it's going to create this fizzy mess, and it's going to create magnified bloating or nausea or discomfort, and the person's going to say, well, that wasn't right for me, I shouldn't be using that. But the reality was they really wanted to take steps to knock that overgrowth down a little bit. We're going to get to that in just a second. But this study says when someone starts to use betaine HCl capsules, they should use 1 with their meal. And if they don't have any discomfort, the next meal they go up to 2. And they just continue to increase each meal until they get at a dose where they start to feel like some discomfort in there, like maybe there's too much acid. And then they know, oh, well, I reached the amount that I need. I'm going to back off 1 to go back to the dose where I didn't have discomfort, and I know that that's my right dose that I should be using. Now, that's just not the way that we do it, and we don't see that that really turns out to be a reality for most actual humans, especially people that are really dealing with some type of significant overgrowth, which is really common when there's a loss of appetite because of those reasons we talked about in the last video. So we like to see people go up to a maximum of 5 capsules. We don't want people using a whole bunch more than that, because about 5 capsules worth of HCl, about 2,500 milligrams, is about what the human body makes when everything is working correctly for a full meal. So we don't like to see people supplement more than that. If they use 5 capsules and that's not enough to really acidify their food, it's likely that they have an overgrowth and they need to take steps to correct that. So we'll go over that a little bit more. But just understand that you're going to want to bookmark this video, and in the description we'll put some other video of ours if in case you run into any trouble, like if you have discomfort when you're using HCl, we'll put a link to our video of possible trouble when first starting HCl. So that'll just kind of help you navigate that a little bit. The people who have the most trouble when first starting HCl are usually the people who need it the most. So that'll help you understand if you're having trouble that shows up, the steps you can take to improve that scenario. And then the next step is we want to thin this bile out so that it can flow properly out of the gallbladder and come down and help neutralize the acids. And all those things can help trigger the pancreas to squirt out the bicarb to help neutralize acids, and all these enzymes to help us digest our food. So we really want that bile flowing. So we use supplements to kind of thin it out. And I'll point you to a video at the end of this video that'll kind of go through those steps to help you thin out that bile. But that's real important to do. And a lot of times if someone doesn't have enough stomach acid, then they're not triggering these hormones that we talked about before, the cholecystokinin, to kind of tell the gallbladder to squirt that bile down. So then the bile stays in there, it gets too thick and sticky, and then it's not flowing right. So, not everybody's dealing with all these issues that we're going to talk about fixing, but it's really common that if someone has one of these issues for a while, it has the ability to create trouble over here. And then we talked about before how when someone doesn't have enough stomach acid, they're just inviting in all these bad guys, and so it's really common to see an overgrowth in the small intestine and or the stomach. So thinning out that bile is really crucial. And then step number 3 is just fixing this whole microbiome situation. If there's an overgrowth in the stomach or the small intestine, we really want to take steps to wipe those out, because they're putting out all this waste that's making a person either feel nauseous or just like, hey, I don't really want to eat anything. It's putting out all these toxins. And if somebody's bile isn't flowing correctly, they can't detox all those toxins correctly. So now more toxins are accumulating and they're feeling much worse. So that's why we want to get that bile flowing, and then we want to wipe out these bad guys. So there's steps that we use like mastic gum and D-limonene and celery juice. All these things are popular like antimicrobial natural steps that a person can take to kind of reduce an overgrowth. And mastic gum, we usually use that away from food so it can kind of move through and kind of carry some bad guys out with it. D-limonene, we do that away from food too, usually in the morning, and that's just like an orange peel extract, and that's really good at wiping out bad guys in the stomach. And then celery juice can be really effective if a person drinks enough of it, like 15 to 20 ounces on an empty stomach. That can really help wipe out some bad guys here too. So I have videos in a lot more depth on how to use all those things in the description below. So again, you'll want to come back to this video if you need to kind of dig into some of these things. But these are easy steps to do that someone can use to wipe that out. So if someone's having a lot of discomfort with HCl, after using these steps for 2, 3, 10 days, depending on how bad the situation is, then they could test out using HCl again, and it's usually not going to create the discomfort that it did when the overgrowth was kind of out of control. And then once you wipe out enough bad guys where you're not feeling, bloating or having acid reflux and all these kind of things, then we want to implement some probiotics to really set up some good gut flora here in the large intestine. But we don't want to start with probiotics. If somebody puts that in there, it's going to create a lot more discomfort when the good guys are battling with all the bad guys. So we want to take care of some type of overgrowth first before we implement that step. Because this study on the effects of gut microbiota on appetite regulation is going to help you understand that why when all this stuff is going wrong in here, it can really affect somebody's appetite. So just remember how much effort you have to put into any of these steps, whether it's the, thinning out the bile or acidifying the stomach or wiping out bad guys. That's really going to vary from person to person. If you get stuck and you need help with that, we have a totally free digestion course that walks you through all these steps with simple little videos, and we'll put the link to that totally free course in the description below. And it kind of walks you through things like, oh wow, I started HCl and I got magnified reflux, and it kind of helps you understand, well, you really need to be able to acidify the stomach enough to trigger this valve to close, and if you're just putting a little bit of acid in there but it's not enough to trigger this valve to close, now the small amount's going to come back up and really burn you. So it just walks through complications that you can run into that make this whole process a lot easier, so you can help the body work the way that it's supposed to work. It's a lot easier to fix problems when you work with your body instead of against it. But to better understand these underlying causes, if you haven't seen it already, jump over now and check out our video on 5 reasons you've lost your appetite. And if you've already seen that, jump over and check out our video on 5 steps to improve bile flow so you can start thinning out that bile and help the body detox and take care of those things. I can't wait to hear about your results.